On the morning Philip expected to be celebrated as a respected father, the people he trusted most prepared a betrayal so deep it could have destroyed him forever. It was Father's Day, and a delivery man placed a carefully wrapped box in his hands. The neighbors were outside enjoying the sunny weekend, yet inside Philip's home, tension was waiting to erupt. His wife, Precious, looked at the box and whispered with trembling lips, "Philip, don't open it." He frowned, confused, his heart beating faster. Something about the package already felt wrong, like a trap disguised as a gift. Precious's voice shook as she pulled Philip closer. "Don't you see the holes on the side? Something alive is inside. Where are you watching from today? Kindly hit like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more." Philip blinked in frozen shock, his mind racing. A gift with breathing holes. The small punctures along the cardboard were so carefully hidden that he would never have noticed if Precious hadn't pointed them out. Suddenly, the cheerful hum of Father's Day morning vanished, replaced by a chilling silence. Philip's hands trembled. The box twitched faintly on the table, and a soft rustling sound emerged. Precious gripped Philip's arm with desperate force, her nails digging into his shirt. Philip stepped back. "Don't touch it again." They both froze, listening. The sound from inside grew sharper, a hiss escaping through the holes. Philip's throat tightened. Who would send such a thing? Who would think of this cruel trick on Father's Day? His heart answered before his mind could. His daughter, Sandra, and her reckless husband, Felix. The memory of their last fight still burned in his chest. They had shouted, demanded money, and stormed out vowing revenge. Could they truly have gone this far? Philip grabbed his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed emergency services. "We received a suspicious package," he stammered. "Something alive is inside, and it's making sounds." The dispatcher's voice was calm but firm. "Stay away from the box. Do not touch it. Officers will arrive in 10 minutes. 10 minutes suddenly felt like 10 hours. Philip and Precious retreated to the corner of the room, their eyes never leaving the package on the table. The box twitched again, the hiss louder now, cruelly mocking the quiet house. Precious whispered, "It's them, Philip. I know it is." The past week replayed in Philip's mind like broken glass cutting into his thoughts. Just days ago, Sandra had thrown insults across their living room, her manicured hands shaking as she accused him of hoarding wealth while she and Felix suffered. But Philip remembered the truth. Her debts from shopping, his gambling, the endless requests for money. He had finally said no. That single refusal had turned their daughter into a stranger. Now, as the package hissed louder, Philip realized this was more than anger. It was deliberate, calculated revenge. And today it had arrived at his door. Outside, the street carried its normal rhythm. Children rode bicycles, neighbors greeted one another, and birds chirped in the morning sun. But inside Philip's home, fear clung to the air like thick smoke. The package on the table rustled again, and the sound was sharper, angrier, like something inside was fighting to get free. Precious clasped her hands together, whispering a prayer under her breath. Philip felt sweat bead on his forehead as he kept staring at the box. This was no ordinary gift. It was a message, a warning, that the battle between family and betrayal had only begun. The minutes crawled by like hours. Precious paced the living room, her steps heavy with dread, while Philip sat frozen, watching the package as though it might leap into the air. Every creak of the wooden floor, every gust of wind against the window, made him flinch. Then came the sound again, hiss, hiss, louder this time, sharp enough to cut through his bones. "It's alive," Precious whispered, her voice trembling. "And it's angry." Philip clenched his fists, his heart pounding with questions. Who raised a daughter who would turn Father's Day into such a cruel weapon? The distant wail of a siren reached their ears, faint but growing louder. Precious grabbed Philip's arm. "They're coming," she whispered with relief. But even as the sound drew closer, the package grew restless, rocking slightly on the table. Philip's breath caught in his chest. "Stay back, Precious," he warned, his voice low but steady. For a moment, their eyes met, both filled with the same painful truth. They knew who had done this. They didn't want to say her name aloud, but Sandra's shadow filled the room, stretching longer with every hiss from the cursed box. 2 sharp knocks rattled the front door. Precious gasped, her hands flying to her chest. Philip rose quickly, relief washing over him as he opened the door. Standing tall in a crisp uniform was Officer Adewale, a broad-shouldered man whose presence filled the doorway with authority. "Mr. Philip?" he asked firmly. "We received your call." Philip nodded and pointed toward the living room. "It's there," he whispered. The officer stepped inside, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the box. The hissing sound returned, louder now, echoing like a snake in the grass. Adewale's face hardened. "Step back," Officer Adewale commanded, pulling on his gloves. His calm authority steadied Precious, though her hands still shook. Philip and his wife stood near the doorway, hearts racing, as Adewale crouched carefully near the box. The hissing came again, harsh and long, followed by frantic rustling inside. "It's definitely alive," Adewale muttered. He reached for his radio. "Control, this is Unit 12. Requesting animal control at Suncrest Estate. Possible dangerous reptile delivery." His voice was calm, but his eyes told another story. This was no simple prank. It was a dangerous act of deliberate cruelty. Philip's chest tightened as he watched Officer Adewale circle the box like a hunter studying dangerous prey. Precious clung to the wall, her breaths shallow, her eyes wide with dread. The officer pressed his ear close, listening. The hissing stopped suddenly, leaving the house in heavy silence. "It knows we're here," he murmured, straightening up. Precious gasped softly, and Philip's fists clenched. The idea of a creature being sent into his home by the very child he once carried on his shoulders made his stomach twist. Betrayal had never felt so heavy, so sharp, so alive. Through the thin curtains, Philip saw flashing lights wash across the driveway as another vehicle arrived. Animal control had come. A tall man in a khaki uniform stepped out, carrying a reinforced container and long steel tongs. His badge read, "Officer Chaik." Calm and deliberate, Chaik moved as though he'd faced monsters before. He greeted Adewale with a firm nod. "What are we dealing with?" he asked. Adewale pointed to the box. "Alive. Hissing. Likely reptile." Chaik's eyes narrowed. "Then let's handle this quickly." Precious whispered a prayer of thanks, though her voice shook like fragile glass. With a steady hand, Chaik knelt by the package, tapping it gently with the steel tongs. At once, the hissing flared up, louder than ever, echoing through the room like a warning from the underworld. The box trembled violently, rocking side to side as though the creature inside wanted freedom. Precious let out a cry, covering her mouth. Philip's legs locked in place, every muscle screaming to intervene, yet knowing he could not. Chaik gave a low whistle. "Oh, it's awake," he muttered. "And angry." The atmosphere grew tense, a storm of fear brewing in their living room. With practiced precision, Chaik sliced the box open, revealing a writhing mass of scales. A 3-foot snake, coiled tight, eyes glinting, slithered out with a sharp hiss. Its tongue flicked the air, tasting freedom and danger all at once. Precious screamed and clutched Philip's arm. He felt his knees weaken but stood his ground. The snake's body shimmered under the light, patterns twisting like shadows on water. Chaik moved fast, pinning it with his tongs, lifting it into the reinforced container. The lid slammed shut with a metallic clang. The hiss was silenced, but the terror remained heavy. Precious collapsed into a chair, trembling so hard the wooden frame creaked beneath her. "Who would do this?" she whispered, though the answer was already etched into her heart. Philip swallowed hard, staring at the sealed container. "This isn't a prank," he muttered. "It's revenge." Adewale scribbled notes into his pad, his expression stern. "Someone who knew your address, your habits, and had access to such a creature did this intentionally. Do you have enemies?" The word cut deep. Philip thought of Sandra and Felix, Their endless demands, their venomous words. But how could he call his daughter an enemy? Philip's memory stabbed at him like a knife. 3 weeks ago, he had noticed a strange charge on his credit card. $160 at a pet store named Jungle World. Sandra had brushed it off as a toy for the grandchildren. Now the truth pierced his chest. It had been this. He clenched his jaw, rage boiling beneath his calm face. Adewale's eyes studied him. Do you know who might be responsible? Philip shook his head slowly, unwilling to speak the name aloud. To admit it would be to accept that his own blood had tried to harm him. Chike lifted the container, securing it carefully in his van. It's a corn snake, he explained. Not venomous, but dangerous in intent. Whoever sent it paid money for this. His tone carried quiet disapproval. Philip nodded stiffly, his throat dry. Precious whispered, "Our daughter." But her voice broke before finishing. Adewale closed his notebook and looked Philip in the eye. "We can investigate, but family matters often get buried in silence. If you protect the guilty, this will only grow worse." Philip turned away, staring at the window where the neighbors' laughter still floated through the air. When the officers left, silence swallowed the house. The coffee table bore faint scratches where the snake's movements had rattled the box. The rug still carried dark stains from Sandra's last outburst. Precious busied herself in the kitchen, clattering dishes too loudly, her stress echoing in every movement. Philip sank into his leather chair, exhaustion weighing heavy. His mind circled the same truth. Sandra had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had chosen cruelty over kinship. The betrayal had not come from a stranger in the streets, but from the very child he had raised. Philip's phone lay heavy in his hand. Sandra's smiling face beamed from the contact photo, a memory of happier times that now felt like lies. With trembling fingers he dialed. After 2 rings, her voice filled the line. "Happy Father's Day, Dad." Her tone was too bright, too rehearsed. Philip's stomach churned. "Sandra," he said slowly, "do you know anything about a strange package delivered this morning?" There was a pause, long enough to reveal guilt. Then came Felix's chuckle in the background, low and mocking. The sound sliced through Philip's heart like a blade of truth. Sandra's voice shifted, defensive and sharp. "What are you talking about? Why would I send you anything strange?" But Felix's laughter continued, cruel and careless. Philip's face hardened, his fears confirmed. She had done it. His daughter, the child for whom he had worked day and night, had turned Father's Day into a weapon. "It was just a little prank," Sandra snapped when pressed. "A little prank." Philip's jaw tightened. Sending a live snake was not a prank. It was a declaration of war. And for the first time, he knew exactly what he had to do next. Philip ended the call before his voice betrayed the storm inside him. Precious stood in the doorway, her apron still on, eyes filled with questions she already knew the answers to. She laughed. Precious whispered. Philip nodded, his jaw tight. Felix laughed too. "They think this is a game." Precious sank into a chair, covering her face with trembling hands. For years, she had begged Philip to stand firm, to stop giving in. Now the snake had shown them both the truth. Sandra no longer saw her father as a parent, but as a target. That evening, Philip sat in his study, surrounded by papers that told the story of decades of sacrifice. Bank statements, receipts for tuition fees, records of loans never repaid. His love for Sandra written in ink and numbers. He stared at them, his heart heavy. Every dollar had been given in hope, but every gift had fed her hunger for more. Tonight he decided the feeding would stop. He opened his laptop, logged into Citibank, and pulled up his accounts. With steady hands, he began undoing years of enabling. Each click felt like a chain breaking. First, he removed Sandra as an authorized user on his credit card. The system asked, "Are you sure you want to revoke this access?" Philip whispered, "Yes," and pressed confirm. Next, he cancelled the automatic transfers that flowed into her account each month, Money she had long claimed was for rent but often wasted on Felix's habits. Then he changed his banking pins, choosing numbers tied not to Sandra, but to his life with Precious. By the time he was done, his hands no longer shook. For the first time in decades, he felt in control again. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains as Precious served him a cup of tea. She studied his face, noticing the calm that replaced years of quiet torment. "You did something," she said softly. Philip nodded. "I stopped being her bank." Precious's lips quivered between sadness and pride. "She will come," she whispered. "She always comes when she can't get what she wants." Philip sipped his tea slowly. "Then let her come. I am ready." The words tasted firm, final. He was not just preparing for a daughter's anger. He was preparing for war. At exactly 8:30, Philip's phone rang. Sandra's name flashed on the screen. He answered calmly. "Good morning, Sandra." Her voice was shrill with panic. "Dad, my card isn't working. The rent is due. My car insurance payment bounced. What's happening?" Philip took another slow sip of tea. "Sandra," he said, "I know you sent that package. This ends now." Silence. Then her tone shifted, dripping with venom. "You've lost your mind. How could you do this to me?" Still, she did not deny his words. Instead, she accused him of betrayal, as though she were the victim. Philip leaned back in his chair, his voice calm and steady. "Sandra, I have paid your bills for years. I have sold my possessions to cover your debts. But sending me a snake, threatening me with my own grandchildren, that was your choice. And choices have consequences." Sandra's voice rose to a scream. "You think you can cut me off? You'll never see Emma and Luke again. Never." The words once stabbed Philip's heart, but today they only hardened it. "Those threats don't work anymore," he said coldly. "You cannot hold love hostage." The line went quiet. Philip could hear her ragged breathing, her mind scrambling to find the weapon that always worked. Finally she whispered, "I'm your daughter. I'm struggling. You're supposed to help me." For a moment, Philip saw her as a child again, the girl who once drew pictures of their family holding hands. But then Felix's mocking laugh echoed in the background, reminding him of the snake, the betrayal. "You're not struggling," Philip said firmly. "You're choosing. And today, you will face the result of your choices." Then he ended the call. Precious touched his shoulder, her voice quiet but strong. "She will not accept this easily." Philip nodded. "I know." The words had barely left his lips when the sound of a car engine roared into their driveway. Tires screeched against the pavement. Precious's eyes widened. "She's here." Heavy footsteps pounded across the porch. The doorbell rang once, then again, then fists hammered against the wood. Precious trembled, but Philip placed his hand gently over hers. "We face this together," he said. Slowly he stood, his face set like stone. The battle had arrived at his doorstep. When Philip opened the door, Sandra stood there, her face twisted with fury, her hair disheveled, her eyes burning. Beside her loomed Felix, arms crossed, smirk dripping with arrogance. "Dad," Sandra snapped, "we need to talk." Philip remained in the doorway, refusing to move aside. "We already talked this morning. I was clear." Sandra's laugh was sharp, ugly. "You're insane. Cutting me off because of some ridiculous misunderstanding about a package. You've ruined everything." Philip's voice stayed even. "There is no misunderstanding. You sent me a snake. I responded appropriately." Felix stepped forward, his presence filling the doorway like a shadow. "Look, old man," he sneered. "Maybe you didn't think this through. Sandra has expenses. Kids need things. You can't just walk away." Philip's eyes narrowed. "Kids whose mother uses them as bargaining chips. Children who are threatened like weapons. No, Felix. That ends here." Sandra's face hardened into rage. "Fine. You want war. You'll regret this. We're family, and family doesn't abandon family." Philip's voice was calm but deadly. No, Sandra. Family doesn't send snakes on Father's Day. The doorway crackled with unspoken war. Precious stood behind Philip, her eyes locked on Sandra. Enough, she whispered, though her voice trembled. Sandra's glare shifted toward her mother. Stay out of this, Mom. You've always protected him. But today, you'll see what happens when you stand against me. Felix smirked and added, We know where you live, Philip. We know your routines. If you cut us off, don't expect peace. The words dripped with menace. Philip straightened his shoulders, unshaken. Are you threatening me in my own home? The silence that followed was louder than shouting, thick with the poison of betrayal. Philip's voice remained calm, but the firmness in it struck like a hammer. This conversation is over. Leave my property now. Sandra's face twisted, disbelief flooding her eyes. She had expected begging, apologies, or at least hesitation. Instead, her father stood like stone. Felix leaned forward, his jaw tight. You think you can hide behind your pride? You'll regret this. Philip's lips curved into a bitter smile. If you stay, I'll call Officer Adewale back. Next time it won't be family business. It will be police business. The threat of law shifted the air. Sandra's hand shot out, grabbing Felix's arm as though to restrain him from saying more. She hissed, Let's go. But her eyes lingered on Philip, filled with venom. This isn't finished. You've chosen money over family. Remember this day when you're old and alone. She spun on her heel, dragging Felix with her. The car door slammed like a gunshot, tires screeching as they sped away. Precious collapsed onto the nearest chair, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Philip closed the door slowly, his face grave. It's only the beginning, he murmured. That night, the house was unusually silent. Precious sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. She is still our daughter, she whispered, her voice heavy with grief. Philip stared at the dark window, his reflection staring back at him. She crossed a line, Precious. Sending that snake, threatening us with the children. She has become a stranger. Precious's eyes filled with tears. But once, she was our little girl. Philip closed his eyes, remembering her childhood drawings of family stick figures. The memories now felt like ghosts haunting him. The next morning, Philip placed a call to Margaret, their trusted family lawyer. She had managed their documents for 17 years, including their will. Sitting in her office hours later, he explained everything. The snake, the confrontation, the threats. Margaret listened quietly, her pen moving swiftly across her pad. This is no longer about family, she said firmly. This is harassment and intimidation. We need to act on several fronts. Her words, though harsh, steadied Philip. Precious clasped his hand tightly, knowing the step they were about to take would change everything forever. Margaret leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. You want to restructure your inheritance? Philip nodded. Yes, Sandra will not see a cent of my money. Instead, I want everything set aside for my grandchildren's education. College, books, proper schooling. Nothing that can be touched by Sandra or Felix. Margaret smiled slightly. That can be arranged. We'll create a trust controlled by an independent trustee. Sandra won't be able to access it no matter what threats she makes. Precious sighed, a mix of relief and sorrow. At least Emma and Luke will be safe from her greed. Margaret tapped her pen. There's more. I recommend a restraining order. You've described direct threats, intimidation, and a dangerous animal delivered to your home. Courts take this very seriously. If we file, any attempt at contact becomes a legal violation. Philip hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on him. For decades, he had shielded Sandra from consequences. Filing meant exposing her actions to the world. But he looked at Precious's weary face and nodded. Do it. Margaret's eyes softened. It's the hardest choice but also the wisest. Later that evening, Philip and Precious sat quietly in their kitchen. Precious stirred her tea absent-mindedly, her thoughts far away. "Do you think she'll ever forgive us?" she asked softly. Philip shook his head slowly. "This is not about forgiveness. It's about survival. If we continue as before, she will destroy us. Financially, emotionally, and perhaps even physically." Precious closed her eyes, letting silent tears roll down her cheeks. "Then this is the end of the daughter we knew." Philip reached across the table, taking her hand. "Yes, but it may be the beginning of our peace." The following afternoon, Margaret called with confirmation. "The restraining order has been filed. Court officers will deliver it tomorrow morning along with the updated will." Philip thanked her, his chest heavy but steady. That evening, he walked through the garden with Precious. The air smelled of fresh rain, but beneath its sweetness lingered the bitterness of loss. "Do you remember when she made us breakfast on Father's Day at age 9? Precious asked with a wistful smile. Philip nodded, but his heart ached. That little girl was gone, replaced by someone dangerous and unrecognizable. By sunset, Philip felt a strange calm. For the first time in years, the weight of Sandra's demands no longer crushed him. Tomorrow the law would step in where love had failed. Precious leaned on his shoulder as they watched the neighbors' children laugh in the distance, free from the poison that had infected their own home. "We'll survive this," Philip whispered, as though convincing himself. Precious nodded. "We already have." Yet deep inside, Philip knew the storm had not passed completely. Sandra would return. But next time he would be ready, with the law at his side. Morning came with a knock at the door. Philip opened it to find 2 court officers, their presence firm and professional. One handed him an envelope while the other confirmed, "The restraining order has been served to Sandra and Felix this morning. They've also received copies of the will changes." Philip thanked them with a quiet nod, his hand tightening around the papers. Precious watched from the hallway, her heart pounding. "It's done," she whispered. Philip exhaled slowly. "Yes, it's finished." But both of them knew that with Sandra, nothing ever ended quietly. That afternoon, Philip's phone vibrated. He didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. The screen lit up with Sandra's name, and he let it ring. Seconds later, a message arrived. "How could you do this to me? You've destroyed my life. You'll regret this." Felix followed with another text. "Paper doesn't stop blood. We'll find a way." Precious's face paled as she read over his shoulder. Philip deleted the messages without replying. "From now on, the law speaks for us," he said firmly, though the weight in his voice betrayed his sorrow. By evening, news had spread quietly among neighbors. Some had seen the officers delivering documents. Whispers began. Why would a daughter take her parents to court? Philip walked through Suncrest Estate with his head high, though inside, shame and grief battled for space. Precious avoided the market that day, unwilling to answer curious questions. "People will never know the truth," she said softly. Philip shook his head. "They don't need to. We know. And the law knows." Still, the sting of having their private war turned into public gossip cut deeply, like salt on an open wound. 2 days passed in silence, a silence Philip and Precious had not known in years. No demands, no threats, no desperate calls in the middle of the night. They spent evenings together in peace, walking hand in hand, cooking without interruptions, laughing softly at memories. But beneath the peace lurked a shadow. Precious asked one night, "Do you think she will stop now?" Philip stared at the flickering lamp, his face unreadable. "No," he replied quietly. "She will fight harder. But this time she will fight against the law, not against us." On the 3rd morning, a car roared into the neighborhood. Philip saw it from the window, Sandra's dark SUV, parked carelessly across their driveway. She stormed out, Felix trailing behind, both clutching the legal documents they had been served. They hammered at the door, shouting Philip's name. Precious froze, fear flashing in her eyes. Philip stood tall. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steady. He opened the door only halfway. Sandra's face was red with rage. How dare you? You cut me out like I'm nothing. Her voice cracked, filled with fury and disbelief. Philip did not flinch. You are not nothing, he said calmly. But you chose this path. You chose threats. You chose cruelty. You chose Felix over family. Sandra shook the papers in her hands, screaming. A restraining order? A trust fund. You gave everything to strangers instead of me. Philip's voice was firm, measured. Your children will be cared for. Their education will be secured. But you will not touch a cent. I will not fund your destruction anymore. Felix stepped forward, his fists clenched. You can't hide behind paper forever, old man. Philip's eyes locked on Felix, his voice low but sharp. If you cross that line, Felix, the police will not hesitate. Think carefully about your next step. For a moment, silence stretched like a rope pulled tight. Then Precious stepped forward, her face pale but strong. Sandra, she said softly, we loved you more than life itself. But love cannot be twisted into chains. You turned it into a weapon. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, though rage burned brighter. You'll regret this, she spat before spinning on her heel. Felix followed, muttering curses under his breath. Their SUV screeched away, leaving only tire marks on the street and heavy silence in the air. Precious collapsed against Philip's shoulder, shaking. What if they come back? She whispered. Philip held her tightly. Then the law will stand between us. And if that fails, I will. For the first time, Precious believed him. He was no longer the man who bent under Sandra's demands. He had become the shield they both needed. Yet in her heart she mourned, not for their safety, but for the daughter she had lost to greed and bitterness. That night, Philip sat alone in his study, the documents Margaret had prepared stacked neatly before him. He ran his fingers across the trust papers, knowing Emma and Luke's futures were secure. But the cost of that security was unbearable silence between him and his only child. The wind rattled the window, echoing like Sandra's threats. He whispered into the darkness. I did everything I could. I gave you everything. His voice cracked, but he did not cry. Instead, he pressed his signature on the final page. Love had become boundaries. Hope had become protection. Days later, peace began to settle again. Precious tended to her garden, and Philip returned to his morning walks. But both carried invisible scars. At the local market, whispers still followed them, but Philip no longer cared. He had reclaimed his dignity, his peace, and his marriage. In the evenings, as neighbors' children laughed outside, Precious would whisper, I wonder if Sandra realizes what she has lost. Philip would sigh deeply. She will. One day. But by then it will be too late. And under the calm African sky, their story carried the heavy lesson of boundaries too long delayed. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Suncrest Estate, Philip and Precious sat outside their home, the air filled with the sound of crickets. It had been a week since Sandra's last outburst. For the first time in years they felt peace. No phone calls, no demands, no chaos. But with peace came sorrow. Precious whispered, She's still my daughter. Philip squeezed her hand. And she's still my daughter too. But she chose a different path. We cannot walk it with her anymore. Their silence carried both grief and relief, a bittersweet blend of love and loss. The following day, Margaret called with an update. The restraining order is holding strong. If Sandra or Felix attempt to break it, they will face charges. Her voice carried both reassurance and warning. Philip thanked her, then hung up slowly. He stared at the wall where old family pictures still hung. Sandra at age 10, smiling with missing teeth, holding a balloon. How did we get here? He murmured. Precious touched his arm gently. Love blinded us. We gave too much. And she learned nothing except to take. Philip nodded. The truth stung, but it was undeniable. Days turned into weeks. Sandra's silence was louder than her shouting had ever been. No visits, no messages. Only the echo of absence. Neighbors began to notice. Some whispered that Philip had been too harsh. Others quietly admired his courage. At the market, an elderly woman touched Precious's arm and said, "You chose dignity. Don't let anyone shame you for that." Precious smiled faintly. In that moment, she realized their story wasn't just about family. It was about boundaries. Boundaries that every parent eventually had to draw when love became poison instead of healing. Then one Sunday morning a letter arrived. Not from Sandra but from Emma and Luke. Written in uneven handwriting it read, "We miss you, Grandpa and Grandma. We don't understand why Mommy says we can't visit. We love you." Precious wept openly as she held the letter close to her chest. Philip's eyes watered, but his jaw set firmly. "They remember us," he said softly. "And they always will." That letter became their anchor, proof that the next generation could still know love untainted by greed. It gave them strength to endure the silence Sandra had built. Philip decided to add a clause to the trust fund, ensuring Emma and Luke would receive a letter from him every year until adulthood, stored safely with the trustee. "Even if Sandra keeps them away," he told Precious, "our words will reach them one day. They will know the truth. They will know we loved them." Precious smiled through her tears. "That is the legacy we leave. Not money, not property, but truth and love." For the first time, hope shone in her eyes again, soft but real. The grandchildren were their reason to keep moving forward. One evening, as Precious watered her plants, she saw Sandra's SUV slowly pass by the house. Sandra's face was visible through the glass, pale and hollow. Her eyes locked on the home she no longer had access to. She didn't stop, didn't knock, didn't shout. She just drove by in silence, her anger replaced by something else, regret. Precious's chest ached, but she turned back to her flowers. "We cannot open the door anymore," she whispered. Philip joined her, nodding. "If we open it, we invite the snake back inside." Together they stood firm. Life gradually regained rhythm. Philip returned to his morning routine, reading the newspaper on the porch, sipping tea, greeting neighbors. Precious spent her afternoons in the garden, humming quietly. They learned to live with the hole Sandra had carved in their family. At night, they spoke of the grandchildren, not with bitterness, but with hope that the seeds of love they had planted would one day bloom in Emma and Luke's hearts. Their pain became wisdom, and their wisdom became strength. Slowly, they discovered that peace was possible, even in the shadow of betrayal. Months later, Philip received another call from Margaret. "Your trust fund is now active. Emma and Luke's future is secured. No one, not even Sandra or Felix, can touch it." Philip closed his eyes, relief washing over him like rain after drought. "Thank you," he said. After the call, he held Precious's hand. "It's done. They will have the future we dreamed of, even if we are not there to see it." Precious smiled softly. "That is enough." Together they sat in silence, watching the sky turn crimson with the setting sun, their hearts lighter than before. As years rolled on, neighbors remembered the story of Philip and Precious, the couple who chose peace over chaos, dignity over shame, wisdom over blind love. Some told it as a warning to parents who gave too much. Others told it as a story of courage, of how even in betrayal, lessons could be carved. Philip and Precious themselves told it rarely, but when they did, it was with the calm voice of experience. They had learned that love without boundaries is no love at all, and that sometimes, saying no is the greatest gift a parent can give. On a quiet evening, Philip and Precious sat together under the African sky, the stars glittering like watchful eyes. "Do you think she'll ever change?" Precious asked softly. Philip took a long breath. "Perhaps. But whether she does or not, we are free." Precious rested her head on his shoulder, their hearts finally at rest. The night was peaceful, the air cool, the silence no longer heavy but healing. Their story ended not with riches or reconciliation, but with wisdom and peace. A tale whispered across Suncrest Estate as a reminder, even the deepest wounds can lead to freedom.